Hey everyone and welcome to this vlog. Today I will do my first book review and I brought you the book Man's Search for Meaning, written by Viktor Frankl. And today I will quickly share my own interpretation of the book and will read out some quotes that really inspired me when reading the book. So as I said, this book was written by Viktor Frankl, who worked as a psychiatrist in Austria and was also a Holocaust survivor. And these two parts of his life are really displayed and described in this book. So the first part of the book is about his very horrifying experience in the concentration camp. And the second part is about his interpretations and his therapy approach that he developed based on his experience, which is known as logotherapy. Let's start with the first part of the book. And what I often do, and I got this tip from Tim Ferriss, in the first page of the book I will write some quotes, some pages that triggered me and that are relevant for me to go back to. I think this is a very famous one, a famous quote that most of you probably heard already. And it's on, if you have the book, it's on page 65. And what he's saying is, we who lived in concentration camps can remember the man who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedom, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And this is really a powerful message. So despite the horrifying situation and circumstances where these men had to survive in the concentration camps, and Viktor Frankl has been in different concentration camps, Dachau and Auschwitz were one of them. So what he observed is basically that people always have a choice how they want to live their life. Do I want to give my bread, or do I want to be a god that tortures people? And choosing is really something that is in our hands, in our freedom. And he saw that many times in specific situations in the concentration camp, where the people just lost it and gave up, and then they died immediately after, or people could see the beauty and could hold on their family or their profession, and they said, no, there's something worthwhile to live for. And that was the meaning part that he describes as the essential element for being alive. And this is really a powerful message that he brings throughout the book. Another very powerful quote that I like to read is the importance of suffering, saying that's on page 67 for those who have the book. If there is a meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an ineradicable part of life, even as fate and death. Without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete. And I think Viktor Frankl is the best example of how someone can give purpose to suffering. So all these years in concentration camps, all these devastating experiences that he had, all fueled into his passion for therapy and creating this therapy approach where meaning is at the center, which was then also a very well accepted approach, and still is in therapy, in order to cure many different mental disorders, but also in positive psychology, where it is rather about how to live a good life. So it really found its way into psychology and psychotherapy. And from this experience, I also want to go now into the second part of the book. He writes about logotherapy and his life after the concentration camp. As I said, he is a survivor. He was a survivor, he's dead already. And he gave some really interesting examples where he worked with clients and used the logotherapy approach to support them in their coping with all kinds of situations. yeah, I mean, that's maybe important to notice. Logotherapy, logo, uh, that's a Greek word, stands for meaning. So it's really the therapy for meaning. So supporting someone to realize their meaning and also confront themselves with probably meaningless. That's in Viktor Frankl's words often the cause for suffering and the cause for mental diseases is the meaningless. I want to give you a quick example where he describes a situation of a client. It's on page 113 for those who have the book. So he used that example. Once an elderly general practitioner consulted me because of his severe depression. He could not overcome the loss of his wife, who had died 2 years before and whom he had loved above all else. Now, how could I help him? What should I tell him? Well, I refrained from telling him anything but instead confronted him with the question, what would have happened, doctor, if you had died first and your wife would have had to survive you? Oh, he said, for her this would have been terrible. How she would have suffered. Whereupon I replied, you see, doctor, such a suffering has been spared her, and it was you who have spared her this suffering. To be sure, at the price that now you have to survive and mourn her. He said no word, but shook my hand and calmly left my office. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. So, what you can retrieve out of this story is basically that he brought meaning to the situation of this officer. And the meaning was the death of his wife and his mourning. And he actually prevented her from suffering because she died first. A very powerful example, I feel, to highlight the essence of logotherapy. Of course, there is much more to explore, and I don't want to go now into detail. There are some other very powerful examples which you can look up online and techniques that are used in logotherapy. For me, the essence is, again, we have the freedom to choose, and we have the freedom to choose a life that is filled with meaning in every moment again. So it's not about once finding meaning in your life and then you're done, but rather it's always recalibrating, reevaluating if I'm still on the path of a meaningful life. If not, if that is also a cause for pain and suffering. So with that, I want to leave it by that. I hope you enjoyed watching this first book review. If yes, please leave a comment, give me some feedback, and thanks for watching. Boom!